The man who stood at the altar waiting for Eliza Marrow had just announced to a full church that her dead mother owed him a winter's worth of coal. She walked out before vows. Now his sleigh bells were behind her on the road, and they were getting louder. She had one boot full of snow, a carpet bag, and a red lantern burning somewhere above the ridge. The lantern meant someone up there still opened a door for strangers. She needed it to be true. "Open it," she said, grabbing the iron handle. "Please, I paid as far as Mercy Line." The driver would not look at her. His beard was rimmed with ice and fear made his mouth hard. "Mercy Line is the shack above the cut. Coach, don't take trouble past the cut. Trouble is behind me. Trouble owns my winter coal." He slapped the reins before she could climb back. The coach lurched away, wheels grinding through packed snow, and Eliza stood in the road with a carpet bag, a ruined wedding dress under her brown traveling coat, and the bells behind her coming closer. The lantern on the ridge burned red through the storm. It was faint, no bigger than a coal under ash, but it meant shelter. Her mother had taught her that before fever took her. Red meant open stove. Red meant no traveler was turned away. Red meant a person who reached the door was still a person, no matter who chased her. The wind shoved her sideways. She climbed. By the time she reached the line shack, the red lantern was guttering in its tin hood. A woman inside pulled the curtain aside, saw Eliza's torn veil, and dropped the cloth as if Pike's name had walked up the hill before her. Eliza pounded once. "I am 26 years old. I am not lost. I am not stolen. I am asking for shelter." The bolt moved halfway, then stopped. Below the ridge, the bells were not slowing. She could see the lantern of Pike's lead horse now, a moving point of light against the white. He had brought riders. A man's voice came from the stable side, rough from cold. "Nettie, open that door." "Rowan," the woman said from inside, "look at her first." "I did." Boots crossed the porch. The man who stepped into the lantern wash was tall, narrow through the hips, and scarred along the left side of his face where old fire had pulled one eyelid lower than the other. He carried a feed fork, not a gun. Snow silvered his hat brim. He looked past Eliza once, toward the bells below, then back at her face. "Are you hurt?" "Not if that door opens." The corner of his mouth tightened, not with humor, with decision. He lifted the latch and pushed the line shack door wide. Heat struck her knees first, then the smell of coffee, wet wool, coal smoke, and horses packed close. 3 freight drivers sat near the stove with tin cups in their hands. Nettie Graff, the widow who kept the Mercy Line register, stood with both palms pressed flat to her apron. Nobody spoke as Eliza crossed the threshold. The scarred man stepped in behind her and did not bar the door. "My name is Rowan Vale," he said. "This is a mercy shack. If you can stand by the stove, stand. If you need the bench, take it. Nettie, bring dry stockings." Nettie did not move. "Mr. Pike will ask who let her in. Then he'll know." One of the drivers scraped his chair back. "Vale, that there is Pike's bride. He came through Stony Bend ringing a bell like a funeral, said she stole a mare and jumped the church door." Eliza turned on him. "I walked out before the vows, no mare, no theft, no husband." The driver looked at her bridle cuff and then at the floor. Rowan set the feed fork beside the door. "You heard her. You believe a runaway in wedding clothes over Silas Pike." "I believe a grown woman can say no before a preacher says amen." That sentence steadied her more than the stove did. Eliza gripped her carpetbag with both hands because if she let go she might shake hard enough for everyone to see. The line shack was one long room, with a stove in the middle, bunks along one side, a small register desk near the window, and a ladder to the lantern shelf above. A narrow lean-to opened off the back, stacked with oats and folded army blankets. Rowan nodded to the lean-to. "You can sleep behind that curtain. The latch is on your side. The front door stays unbarred while I am here. If the storm breaks by morning and you want the southbound trace, I will hitch a team and put you on it. If you want to send word to kin, Nettie can write it. I have no kin who can outrun Pike. Then we start with dry stockings. Nettie's eyes flicked to the window again. Fear held her still. Eliza knew that fear. It had sat in pews all afternoon while Pike smiled at the chapel door and spoke of debts, favors, propriety, and how a woman alone should be grateful for a man willing to give her his name. Rowan crossed to the blanket shelf himself. When he handed the wool to Eliza, he kept his fingers away from hers, as if even kindness needed room to prove itself clean. "Why do they call it Mercy Line?" she asked. Because silence would let the drivers stare at her torn sleeve. One of them answered before Rowan could. Because Vale keeps that red light burning when every sensible man douses his own. Rowan shot the driver a look, but the man kept going. His brother died below the North Cut 6 winters back. Light went out at the old shack. Since then Rowan here burns fuel like he owns a coal mine. "Enough," Rowan said. The driver lifted both hands. "It is a compliment. It is a dead man being used to fill air." Eliza looked at the red lantern trembling in the window's upper glass. Rowan Vale was not a soft man. He held himself as though a hard word might crack something repaired badly. But when he looked toward the lantern, his whole face changed. Not gentler, more awake. The sleigh bells reached the yard. Every driver in the room went silent. Nettie moved then, not toward Eliza but toward the register desk. She closed the book as if ink could hide her. Silas Pike came through the door without knocking, bringing snow, 2 hired riders, and the smell of expensive tobacco into the Mercy shack. He was broad and clean-shaven, with a fur collar and a black coat that had never been mended by its owner. His eyes found Eliza, dropped to her wet boots, then rose to Rowan. "You have my property in your stove room." Rowan did not lift his voice. "Say that again and you will say it outside." Pike smiled at the drivers as if Rowan had told a rustic joke. "Miss Marrow is frightened. She left Stony Bend confused. Weddings unsettle women." Eliza stepped away from the stove. "I was not confused." Pike's smile thinned. "You were weeping." "Because you told the church I owed you my mother's board bill." "Your mother owed half the town before she died. She kept strangers alive for 20 winters on this road. You bought old accounts from men who had already been paid in meals and shelter." A murmur went through the drivers. One of them looked down at his boots, then back up, as if recalculating something he had believed about his own pay. Nettie stared down at the register book. Pike's gloved hand curled over the back of a chair. "Grief makes poor arithmetic. I forgave more than money today. I offered respectability." "You offered a luck." His eyes flashed. Then the smile returned, worse than anger. "Rowan, I will not quarrel in front of working men. Send her out. I will take her back before she ruins herself." Rowan stood between Pike and Eliza, not close enough to crowd her, but close enough that Pike had to look through him. She said no before vows. "You were not there. She is here now. Do you know what happens to your hay contract if my freight wagons do not climb your east road next week?" "Yes." "Do you know what happens to your coal account?" "Yes." "Then stop acting rich." The words hit the room because everyone knew Rowan was not rich. The roof leaked near the east beam. The blankets were patched. The coal box held less than it should have for a storm that might run 3 days. Rowan looked toward Nettie. "Is his account the reason you nearly left the door closed?" Nettie's face reddened. "He carries this shack through winter." "The shack carried his drivers first." Pike gave a short laugh. "Mercy is easy when somebody else buys coal." Eliza felt every eye on her. She could end this. She could step outside, climb into Pike's sleigh, let the town call it a misunderstanding, let Rowan keep his contract, let Nettie keep coal. That was the old trap. Make a woman's freedom too expensive and then call her selfish for wanting it. "Mr. Vale," she said, "if sheltering me costs you, I can work. I kept my mother's lamp house. I can cook, mend, clean stalls, and read winter signals." Pike turned slowly, listened to her bargain herself down. Rowan did not look away from Pike. "She is not bargaining with you. She has nothing else. She has my shelter till she chooses different." The drivers stared at their cups. One of Pike's riders shifted his weight, uneasy. Pike saw it and snapped his gloves against his palm. "By morning," Pike said, "that red lantern burns under my coal or not at all. Think on who freezes when Vale plays noble." He left the door open behind him. Rowan crossed and shut it against the storm, still without sliding the bolt. For a few seconds, no one moved. Then Nettie shoved the dry stockings into Eliza's hands. "Behind the curtain. Put those on before you lose toes." It was not apology. It was not courage, not yet. But it was a first repair, and Eliza took it. The line shack did not settle after Pike left. It listened. The drivers pretended to drink coffee gone cold. Nettie pretended to stack cups that were already stacked. Rowan went to the coal box, lifted the lid, and looked in long enough for Eliza to understand Pike had not made an empty threat. "How much?" she asked. "Enough for tonight if the wind drops. And if it does not, then morning becomes honest." One of the drivers snorted softly. Vale's way of saying we freeze polite. Rowan shut the coal box. "My way of saying nobody burns the floorboards while there is oat chaff in the stable and cedar deadfall under the lee wall. Oat chaff smokes. So do frightened men." The driver ducked his head. The room needed that small, rough humor more than it wanted to admit. Eliza took the stockings behind the curtain and changed with shaking fingers. Her toes ached as warmth returned, first like needles, then like anger. She heard Rowan outside, telling the drivers which team to move nearer the stable wall. He did not ask whether they owed Pike. He gave each man a task before fear could make him useless. Nettie crossed to Rowan and spoke under her breath. "His rider is still in the yard, just sitting on his horse in the snow, watching the door." Rowan did not look up. Let him watch. When Eliza stepped back out, he was carrying a cracked bucket of frozen oats toward the stove. "That will sour," she said. He stopped. "A what?" "If you thaw it too fast and feed it hot, the horses will colic. My mother kept teamsters alive. The teams taught me the rest." Rowan's scarred cheek shifted with the beginning of a smile he did not let finish. "Show me." It was the first time anyone in the room had asked for her skill without turning it into proof of debt. She took the bucket to the cooler stones by the side wall, broke the oats apart with a stove poker, and mixed in dry chaff before any steam could rise. Then she asked Nettie for salt, not much, just enough to tempt tired horses to drink. "I passed Lamp House Bend once," Rowan said from the doorway. Everyone passed it. Few remembered the woman who held it open. "I remember a red lamp in a sleet storm and bread wrapped in newspaper." Eliza looked down at the bucket because his answer had found a place in her she had braced shut. That was her. He nodded, as if meeting her mother through memory required respect. "Then Pike lied twice tonight." "He lies better than twice a day." "No," Rowan's voice lowered. "He lied when he called you property. Then he lied when he called your mother debt." The stove popped. Nettie turned sharply away. Eliza saw her shoulders move once, a guilty woman's flinch. "If you know that," Eliza said, "why does Pike on this line?" Rowan looked toward the red lantern. "Because after my brother died, I kept the light burning and forgot a light also needs an account book. Pike did not forget." That was the first honest weakness he gave her. Not grief dressed as mystery. Not a scar used to command pity. A plain admission that mercy without money had left a door for Pike to walk through. "Then we keep people warm tonight," Eliza said, "and tomorrow somebody counts different." "Somebody?" "You are poor at account books, by your own confession." This time the smile appeared brief but real. Fair. The drivers saw it. So did Nettie. The room changed by half an inch. Not safe, not free, but less owned by Pike's last sentence. Eliza worked through the next hour because work kept memory from swallowing her. She hung wet gloves on a line, showed Tom how to rub a horse's ears without cracking frozen skin, and helped Nettie stretch beans into a thin stew. Every task made the bridle cuff at her wrist more ridiculous until she untied it and laid the strip beside the red shutter glass. Nettie saw. Want me to burn it? Eliza thought of the chapel, Pike's hand waiting, women whispering that a practical match was better than a lonely road. No, not yet. Why keep it? Because if I burn every piece of what happened, some man will say I imagined the fire. Nettie had no answer for that. She folded the strip and placed it near the register, not as a relic, not as a claim, but as evidence of a choice made before vows. By midnight the wind had thickened until the shack groaned like a wagon under too much weight. Rowan went out twice to check the stable roof. Each time Eliza watched him return with snow frozen on the scarred side of his face and a fresh line of worry at his mouth. She did not sleep. Behind the lean-to curtain she changed into her brown skirt and wool waist, folded the ruined wedding dress as small as she could, and sat on the bunk with one hand on the latch. The latch mattered. It was not much metal, but it sat on her side, and nobody had asked her to be grateful for it. Near dawn, the lantern light changed. Eliza noticed because she had grown up with signal glass staining every winter night. Red was open shelter. Yellow was caution, teams moving slow. Green was private road, freight only, no public stove. Her mother had cursed that green shutter for years because rich men used it when they wanted warmth for cargo before people. The glow over the room was not red anymore. It was green. She pulled back the curtain. Rowan stood at the stove pouring coffee. Nettie was asleep in a chair. The drivers snored in their coats. Who changed the shutter? Eliza asked. Rowan looked up. What? She pointed at the high window. That light is green. He set the pot down and crossed the room in 3 strides. No, I set red before dusk. Then someone climbed the outside shelf. The door burst open before Rowan could answer. A young driver stumbled in, face gray with cold. 2 wagons turned off below the ridge, he gasped. Saw the green, thought Pike opened his freight barn, but the barn doors are locked. One team is down in the drift. The room exploded into movement. Rowan grabbed his coat. Nettie woke with a cry. Eliza stepped into her boots. Rowan pointed at her. Stay by the stove. I know signal glass. I know this road. Then know it faster with me. He hesitated, not because he doubted she was useful. She saw the argument in his face. If he took her out and she died, Pike would own that story forever. If he left her, men might die below the ridge. Eliza reached for the red glass stored on the shelf beside the register. My mother kept Lamp House Bend. I changed shutters at 12 years old with sleet in my hair. If that green stays up, every desperate driver on the South Road will aim at Pike's barn. Nettie whispered he would not lock them out. The young driver stared at her. He did. The drivers looked at each other. One of them, the older man with the frost-split beard, made a sound low in his throat. Not anger yet. Understanding. He put green up, he said, as though saying it confirmed something he had refused to believe all night. He put green up and locked his own barn. He meant for them to drive into nothing. That broke whatever had been left of Nettie's defense. Rowan took the red glass and handed it to Eliza. You climb only when I hold the ladder. I climb when the ladder is under me. His eyes met hers, and for the first time a flicker of warmth entered the hard line of his face. Fair. Outside, the storm cut sound into pieces. Rowan drove a ladder against the lantern pole while Eliza tied her skirt at the knees with a strip from the ruined bridle cuff. The drivers watched from the porch, shame and urgency doing what kindness had not. Before she climbed, Rowan caught the lower rung with one hand and looked toward the road. There is a wagon bell below the cut. Hear it. Eliza listened. At first there was only wind. Then under it one dull clang, not Pike's polished sleigh bells, a wagon bell half choked by ice. How many wagons are out? 3 if the West freight did not turn back. Maybe 4 if the school wagon tried for the lower ranch. School wagon. Teacher takes winter readers to ranch children once a month. She should have stayed at Crow's Well. But she did not. No. That changed the ladder under Eliza's hands, not because a child in the storm would carry the story for her, but because adults had made rules and routes that children trusted. Pike had changed a signal people obeyed without thinking. A lie in a storm did not need to sound convincing. It only needed to be seen from far away. Rowan must have read her face. You come down the moment the glass is set. You still think I am trying to prove courage. I think cold punishes courage and foolishness the same. Then hold well. I will. The promise was small and practical, which made it harder to dismiss than if he had sworn something grand. Halfway up, the wind slapped her against the pole. Rowan steadied the ladder with both arms. Come down if your hands go numb, he shouted. They are angry, not numb. She reached the lantern box. The green shutter had been wired in place, not latched, wired. Pike had meant it to hold. Eliza pulled once and sliced her glove. The wire held. She looked down. Pike's sleigh was coming from the barn road, black against the snow. Knife, she called. Rowan was already climbing behind her. Take mine. Hold the ladder. Take mine. He reached high enough to press the knife into her palm, then dropped back before his weight could shift the ladder. Eliza saw the scar pull white along his cheek. Fear, not of height, memory. She cut the wire. The green shutter fell and vanished into snow. She slid the red glass into place, and the yard flushed crimson. The stranded drivers below saw it. One shouted. Another bell answered from the road. Pike's sleigh reached the yard as Eliza climbed down. His face was no longer polished. It was raw with fury. You touch my freight signal again, and I will have Vale charged with theft and interference. Eliza held out the cut wire. Mercy Line is not your freight signal. It burns on my coal. Rowan stepped beside her. Not anymore. Pike laughed once, then it dies tonight. He turned to his riders. Unload nothing here. Every sack goes back to my barn. Any driver who warms himself at Vale's stove loses work on my road. The drivers who had been ashamed a moment ago became frightened again. Frightened men could freeze with a stove in sight if their families needed wages. Nettie came onto the porch, clutching the register book. Silas, there are women in the lower wagon. Then they should have chosen better weather. Eliza heard the sentence land, not just in her, in Rowan, in Nettie, in every driver who had ever trusted a red lantern. Rowan moved toward Pike, but Eliza caught his sleeve. No, she said low, he wants you to strike him. Pike saw the restraint and smiled. Good, she learns fast. Rowan's hand flexed once, then opened. Bring the lower wagon up, he told the young driver. Use my team. Pike's smile widened. Your team is under Leon as of this morning. The words stopped Rowan. Pike drew a folded paper from his coat, but he did not need to open it. He only needed the shape of it to frighten men trained to obey paper. Eliza watched the drivers' faces go flat. Paper was not proof here. It was a whip. Pike knew it. Your hay haul failed delivery when you sheltered a runaway and delayed my freight. My rider takes your lead pair until damages are counted. Rowan looked toward the stable. His best team. The team that hauled hay to ranches east of the cut. The team that kept his own place from going under. You cannot feed this line without them, Pike said softly. Then I walk. You limp by sundown. The men laughed because Pike did. It It was not true laughter. It was the sound men made when the man who controlled wages told them where safety lived. Rowan's face did not change, but Eliza saw the cost pass through him. Not only pride. The East Road ranches were waiting for hay. If his team stayed tied under Pike's claim, cows would bawl against empty racks by tomorrow evening, and ranch women would curse Rowan Vale before they cursed Silas Pike. "How many families depend on that hay?" she asked. Rowan did not answer quickly enough. Pike did. 6, 7 if you count the widow at Sanddraw, though she pays late and complains early. And you would risk them to drag me back. I am risking no one. Vale is. He chose spectacle over order. The word order turned every face in the yard toward him. Eliza understood the machine now. Pike did not need every person to like him. He needed them to believe his cruelty was structure and everyone else's mercy was chaos. She looked at the drivers. Did the green light mean order when it sent you to a locked barn? No one answered. She pointed toward the lantern above them. Does red mean chaos when it brings you to a stove? Tom's jaw worked. He was young and fear still had a hand on him, but shame had begun to pull the other way. Red means open, he said. Pike's eyes snapped to him. Tom. Tom looked down. I am only saying the rule. Rules are kept by men with accounts. Rowan's voice cut in. Rules are kept by men who keep them when nobody profits. For a moment the two men stood with the snow between them, one with contracts in his coat, the other with a lantern knife in his hand and a team at risk. Eliza felt the pull in the yard. If Rowan struck Pike, Pike won. If Rowan backed down, Pike won. There had to be another way, and it had to be one a roomful of cold people could understand without reading a single line. Eliza had been cold all night. Now heat rose through her. You changed the lantern so people would come to your barn. I secured my freight. You locked the doors. Against theft. Against people. He leaned close enough that Rowan shifted. Pike kept his eyes on Eliza. People who run from vows are poor judges of doors. The slap in that sentence was meant to make her small. It almost worked. The old chapel smell came back. Wet wool, candle smoke, women watching her shake while Pike spoke gently of debt. Then Eliza saw the red lantern burning above him because her hands had put it right. I'm a better judge of doors than you are of vows, she said. One driver made a sound that might have become a laugh if fear had not strangled it. Pike's face hardened. Get in the sleigh. No. You have nowhere else. Rowan answered before she had to. She has here. Pike looked at him with pity sharp enough to cut. For how long? One coal box, one lame team, one noble night. That question held because it was practical. Eliza could feel it. A story about freedom could starve by morning if nobody put fuel in the stove. She turned to Nettie. Where is Pike's account slate? Nettie hugged the register tighter. Eliza. Where? In the desk. Does it list who owes him and who he owes? Nettie's lips trembled. It lists fear. Then read it. Pike barked Nettie. The widow flinched so hard the drivers saw it. That was the first crack in Pike's command. Not proof. Not yet. A human crack. Rowan stepped toward Nettie, then stopped. This had to be hers. Nettie walked back inside. For a moment Eliza thought she would hide the book. Instead she came out with a thin black slate and a packet of account slips tied in string. My husband died owing him for coal, Nettie said, voice shaking. I have kept this desk 3 winters because Silas said one bad word from him would close the stove and put me out. I told myself a closed door for one woman was better than a closed stove for all. Her eyes went to Eliza. That was cowardice wearing arithmetic. Pike's riders looked away. Rowan did not. Nettie held the slate over the porch lantern. He made me mark shelter debt to drivers who had already paid in hauling. He made me mark your mother's meals as unpaid, Eliza, though her ledger showed trade settled. I did not make him do it, but I kept it. Give it to me, Pike said. Nettie dropped the slate onto the stove shovel Rowan kept by the door. Then she thrust the slips into the stove mouth inside the shack. The fire took them fast. Pike lunged. Rowan blocked him without striking, taking Pike's shoulder hard enough to stagger but not enough to start the fight Pike wanted. One of Pike's riders grabbed Rowan from behind. Eliza moved before fear could bargain. She snatched the handbell from the porch hook and rang it until the sound tore through the yard. The lower wagon answered from the road. A woman shouted. A child cried somewhere in the storm, not as a story's heart but as a body in danger. Eliza rang again. Red means open, she shouted. If you can hear me, come to the red. Pike's rider released Rowan to look down the road. That was enough. Rowan swung away, not with a punch, but with his whole body into the stable door, knocking the bar loose before Pike's men could drag out the lead team. Harness, Rowan called. Drivers moved, then froze when Pike turned on them. Anyone who touches that team loses road work. Eliza stood on the porch with the bell in her fist. Anyone who leaves those people in the drift can explain it to them when they crawl here. No one moved. Then the young driver who had first stumbled in stepped off the porch. My sister is in that lower wagon. Pike snapped Tom. Tom took a harness collar from the peg. Then I lose road work. Nobody spoke, but 3 drivers turned their faces toward him instead of toward Pike, the way men turned toward the thing that just decided the room. Another driver rose. My coal is already gone if Pike keeps it locked. A third set down his cup. Red means open. Pike turned to his senior rider, a big man named Cord who had hauled his freight for 4 winters. Cord, get my team. Cord looked at the harness collar in Tom's hands. He did not move. Cord. Cord looked at the road below, where the rescued wagon stood in the last of the storm. He did not move. The sentence passed from man to man, not loud, not grand, but practical. Red means open. A rule older than Pike's accounts. A rule everyone had used and no one had paid attention to until a runaway bride put the glass back where it belonged. Rowan harnessed with them. His scarred cheek had split at the edge from cold, but his hands were steady. Eliza climbed down from the porch. Tell me where to stand, she said. Here, Rowan said, handing her the lead rope, where they can see you. I am not bait. No, you are the reason they know which way is open. That was different. It warmed her in a place no stove reached. The first pull nearly failed. The team lunged, the trace rope jerked, and the lead horse stumbled knee-deep in a drift hardened under powder. Pike's riders watched from their saddles, waiting for exhaustion to prove him right. Rowan went into the drift up to his thighs, freed the rope from a buried mesquite root, and came back breathing hard. You have 1 good pull left in them, Eliza said. I know. Then do not spend it straight uphill. He looked at the road, then at her. What do you see? The wind packed the east side lower. My mother called it a false wall. It looks deeper from here, but the crust carries if you go slant. Tom shook his head. That runs near the gully. Near, not into. If the red lamp stays behind the left shoulder, the team holds the ridge. Rowan studied the blowing snow. You are certain. No man in the yard had asked Pike if he was certain. They had obeyed because his certainty came wrapped in debt. Rowan asked because lives and horses were not props for anyone's pride. Certain enough to stand where I can be blamed, she said. He gave her the lead rope again. Then stand where you can be seen. They tried the slant. Eliza planted herself in the red wash from the lantern and shouted the rhythm her mother had used for freight teams in ice. Not sweet, not musical, plain command. Step, hold, breathe. Step, hold, breathe. The lead horse tossed its head toward her voice. The runners shifted. The wagon below groaned free by inches. When the team crested the ridge, men who had been too afraid to defy Pike a minute earlier cheered without meaning to. The cheer died fast under the wind, but Pike heard it. His face changed because the yard had felt a different authority, one that worked. They brought the lower wagon in with two women, one old man, Tom's sister, and a boy with his mitten frozen to a side rail. Eliza helped Nettie strip off wet gloves and push people toward the stove. Rowan stayed outside with the team, guiding one more wagon by sound. Pike paced like a man watching money walk out of his pocket. When the last team cleared the cut, Pike made his final move. He went to the coal shed and dropped the crossbar through the hasps. "Warm them with virtue," he shouted. "My coal stays mine." The stove inside was already hungry. The rescued travelers had brought cold in with them. The wind found every wall seam. Children did not carry the story, but their shivering made the adult choice impossible to soften. Eliza looked at the coal shed, then at Nettie, then at the drivers who had hauled Pike's sacks for years. "Whose backs brought that coal up here?" she asked. Tom answered first, "Ours." "Whose red light brought you through?" "Mercy Lines," another driver said. "Whose barn was locked?" No one answered, because Pike stood by the hasp with one hand inside his coat. Nettie walked past Pike without looking at him and unlooped the coal shed hasp herself. She had kept that shed under his name for 3 winters. She did not look at him when she opened it. Rowan stepped forward, Sela's move. Pike drew a small pistol, not high, not aimed cleanly, but visible enough. There is the noble limit. The yard went still. Eliza's mouth dried. The controller in Pike had run out of polite tools and reached for the oldest ugly one. She thought Rowan would step in front of her. He started too. She caught his arm. "No. Eliza. He is still making men choose fear." She walked toward Pike before anyone could stop her, not close enough to be grabbed, close enough to make him look at her instead of Rowan. "You told Stony Bend I was confused," she said. "You told the driver I was stolen. You told Nettie I was dead. You told these men they were hungry without you. Now you are telling them coal they hauled to a mercy shack belongs behind your lock while people freeze 5 steps away." Pike's pistol hand tightened. "Take one more step." She stopped. "No, you take one toward the stove. Bring a sack with you." A laugh broke from one of the rescued women, shocked and fierce. It cracked the yard open. Pike's face went dark. "You think a scarred ranch hand and frightened teamsters make you safe?" "No," Eliza said. "I think your road is over if they stop being frightened." Tom picked up a coal hook. Pike swung the pistol toward him. Rowan moved then, fast and low, not toward Pike's chest but toward the shed lantern hanging at Pike's shoulder. He knocked the lantern down with his coat before the flame could catch spilled coal dust. The pistol fired into the snowbank. The sound stunned the yard. Rowan hit the ground hard. Eliza thought he had been shot. For one breath the world emptied. Then Rowan rolled to one knee, alive, coat smoking where the lantern oil had kissed it. One of the drivers, the one who had laughed when Pike laughed, stopped laughing. He was looking at Rowan's coat, at the scorched wool, at the fact that Rowan had gone for the lamp and not the gun, and that the choice had cost him the ground and nearly his coat. The driver's cup was still in his hand. He set it down. That named his risk better than any speech. He had not protected pride. He had protected the people, the coal, the whole shack from fire. The drivers rushed Pike. They did not beat him. They did something worse for a man like him. They stopped asking his permission. Tom twisted the pistol from his hand. Another driver lifted the shed bar. A third carried the first coal sack straight past Pike and into the stove room. Pike shouted names, debts, threats, winter contracts. No one obeyed. Nettie stood in the doorway and spoke over him. Pike grabbed the porch rail to keep from stepping toward her. The grab cost him. Everyone saw it. Her voice was not loud, but every person near the stove heard it. "Mercy Line account with Sela's Pike is closed." Pike turned on her. "You will be out by Monday." She lifted her chin. "Then I will be out with the stove open." Eliza looked at Rowan. He was still on one knee. Blood ran from a shallow cut near his temple where he had hit the frozen ground. She went to him, but he shook his head once, eyes on Pike. Pike saw the drivers carrying coal. He saw his riders standing back. He saw Nettie in the doorway and Eliza in the red lantern light. No veil, no church, no trembling pews, no borrowed shame. "This is theft," he said, but the word had lost its teeth. Tom held up the pistol by the barrel. "No, this is witness." The old man from the rescued wagon added, "And warmth." They took Pike's sleigh team from the trace and tied it to the public hitching rail, not stolen, not harmed, simply no longer pointed toward escape. Pike's own riders refused to untie it. Without obedience, he was only a man in an expensive coat yelling into weather. Rowan rose with Eliza's help. He did not lean long, but he let her hand stay under his elbow for 3 steps, which told her more about trust than if he had claimed not to need it. "Inside," she said, "the lantern is burning red." He looked up. The red glass held steady above the yard. Wagons turned toward it. People came through the door. Coal hit the stove box. Pike stood outside his own command, locked out not by a bolt, but by everyone who had stopped mistaking fear for law. By morning, the storm weakened to a hard gray wind. Pike sat on the coal shed bench under the watch of 2 drivers until the south road opened enough for them to take him to Stony Bend without his pistol and without his account slate. Nobody called it arrest. Nobody needed that word for the story to change. Cord had already unhitched himself from Pike's pay by the time the south road opened. He said nothing to Pike when he left. He handed Rowan 2 day wages and asked whether the East Hay run needed a second team. His coal at Mercy Line had been counted into the public stove ledger under Nettie's name and Rowan's mark. His claim over Eliza had died when he ordered warmth locked away and she opened it. But daylight did not make the cost vanish. Rowan's hay contract was still gone. The East Road family still needed feed before another front came down. Pike's freight mark still sat painted on half the sacks in the shed, and men who had defied him in a storm could still grow cautious when their hands warmed and their stomachs filled. Eliza saw that caution return while the rescued travelers ate. It moved through the room quietly. A driver counted his coins. Another asked whether Pike could close the Stony Bend blacksmith against him. Nettie touched the empty place where the account slate had been and looked older by 10 years. Pike watched all of it from the bench outside. He no longer commanded the yard, but he was waiting for fear to remember him. Eliza put down the ladle. "Who owns the lower hay stacked at Crow's Well?" Rowan looked up. "I do." "Can it be moved without your lead pair?" "Slowly." "Can those drivers move it if they are not hauling Pike's freight?" Tom wiped his mouth with the back of his glove. "For pay." Pike laughed from outside. "With what money?" The question entered the room like a draft. Eliza turned to the travelers at the table. "Who paid Pike for coal or freight that did not reach you last month?" Hands lifted, not all at once, but enough. Nettie drew a breath. The burned slips named some of it. "Then write it again. From mouths, not from Pike's book. Each man marks what he paid, each driver marks what he hauled, and Mercy Line pays the hay run out of what Pike failed to deliver." One driver frowned. "That sounds like court work." "No," Eliza said. "Court work waits for a clerk. Cold does not. This is stove work. You name what keeps people alive today." Rowan watched her with an expression she could not read. Then he stood, took the register from the desk, and set it in front of Nettie. "Mercy Line ledger starts clean," he said. "Not clean because nothing happened. Clean because we write it where everyone can hear." That made the room move. Not cheer. Move. Tom named 3 coal sacks he had hauled to Pike's barn for families who never received them. The old man from the wagon named a paid feed order. Nettie wrote with a shaking hand and did not soften her own part. Rowan put down the loss of his hay contract in plain numbers. Eliza marked the Red Lantern oil ode to her mother's old Lamp House Bend trade, not as a sentimental claim, but as settled winter service Pike had stolen and renamed. By the time Pike's escort team was ready, the room had replaced his invisible fear with visible obligations. That was why his final glare did not cut as deep. Men could still be frightened by him, but now they had heard one another count. The rescued travelers ate oats and beans at the long plank table. Nettie moved among them with red eyes and a straight back. She did not ask Eliza for forgiveness while the room was busy. That mattered because asking would have made Eliza work again. Instead, Nettie brought the register to the table and set it open. "Your mother's name is in the old book," she said. "Lamp House Bend, 20 years of winter aid. I should have said that when he first spoke debt." "Yes," Eliza said. Nettie swallowed. "I will say it in Stony Bend." "Good." It was not tender and it was not cruel. It was a cost placed where it belonged. Rowan sat near the door while Eliza cleaned the cut at his temple. The room watched them without pretending not to. She dabbed melted snow around the wound. "You could have been shot," she said. "I was aiming for the lantern." "That does not improve the sentence." His mouth bent. "No. Your coat is ruined. It was ugly before." She almost laughed. The sound surprised them both when it came. Rowan looked at her as if the laugh were a thing he had found on the road and did not know whether he was allowed to keep. "Your hay contract?" she asked. "Gone." "Your team?" "Still here." "Your road?" "Harder." She pressed the cloth to his temple. "You say bad news like a weather report." "Weather can be worked through. So can bad men sometimes." He looked at the stove, where Tom's sister was wrapping both hands around a cup. "Sometimes they have to be worked around." Eliza lowered the cloth. "You did not ask me to stay." "No." "You offered me the southbound trace." "Still do." "Even after all this." "Especially after all this." The room noise seemed to draw back. Not disappear, just leave space. Rowan's voice roughened. "If you stay because Pike made leaving impossible, then he still has a hand in it. If you go because I made staying heavy, then I am no better dressed. So the South Road stays open. Spring Road too when it comes." Eliza had heard pretty words from men who wanted signatures. Rowan's were plain and inconvenient. They cost him the answer he wanted. "And if I stay for the Red Lantern?" she asked. "Then I will be grateful to the lantern." "If I stay for Nettie's stove?" "Nettie will put you to work before gratitude cools." Nettie called from the far table, "That is true." The drivers laughed, tired and real. Eliza felt the room accept the sound without using it to own her. "And if I stay because the man who keeps this road is stubborn, scarred, poor at jokes, and careful with doors." Rowan's eyes came back to hers. "Then," he said, "I will ask if I may court you when the first thaw opens the lower meadow. Not before you have wages if you want them, a road if you need it, and a room with a latch that stays yours." She let the cloth rest in her lap. "I do not want wages for being sheltered. I was thinking wages for keeping signal glass, and teaching these drivers red from green before they get us all killed." Tom lifted his cup. "I vote yes." "No vote," Rowan said. "Her choice." There it was, not as a moral pin to the wall, but as behavior repeated when everyone could hear. Her choice. Not his rescue, not Pike's loss, not the town's correction. Eliza looked toward the high window where the red lantern still burned. All night she had chased it as shelter. Now it looked like work, responsibility, a place where her mother's knowledge had not died, a place where a woman's no had been believed before it became convenient, and where her yes would have to be worth waiting for. "I will keep the signal through this storm," she said. After that, I will decide the next storm one at a time. Rowan nodded once, fair. Nettie brought the old Mercy line register and set it beside Eliza. The page was blank under the date. Outside, Pike's sleigh tracks were already filling with blown snow. Inside, drivers carried the last coal sacks into the public bin and marked them by tally, not by Pike's permission. Near noon, a lone rider came out of the thinning white below the ridge. The room saw him through the window, saw him sway in the saddle, saw the horse stumble toward the yard. Nettie started for the door. Rowan started too. Eliza reached it first. Once a driver had barred a coach door against her and driven into the storm without looking back. The door at her back now was older, smaller, and warmer. The red lantern above it was the one her hands had set right. She opened the line shack door wide and held it against the wind with both hands. The red lantern burned above her shoulder. Behind her, Rowan waited by the stove, not in front of her, not over her, but ready when she asked. "Come in," Eliza called to the rider. "Mercy line is open." Then she looked back at Rowan, and in front of the whole warm room, she smiled because the door was open by her own hand.